And there it is. There it is. How's everybody doing?
Never-ending intro.
Never-ending intro. We are back again. The
God
crazy
damn it.
duo.
Every single time you do that, I want to start with guess who's back.
And you can. There's nothing wrong with that. It's our show.
No.
So we are back, the two of us, as always. That's Gillian. I'm on. We're in the house. For whatever reason, we've got a New York theme going on here. As you can see, I've got my Mets hat. She just has a regular New York shirt on. Don't know why.
Time when I'm representing.
I'm from New York. She's from Cali. Don't know why she's doing it, but I have to represent. So there you go.
We listen, we don't judge.
There we go. All right. So yes, we are back again to do another show, another nonsense show of ours. As always, this is just for fun. It's for entertainment. We provide you with facts. We provide you with things that we've seen, we've heard, we've read. You make the decision of whatever you want to make the decision for.
We spread rumors. We are the spreader of the rumors.
Yeah, what she said. All right, then.
People don't listen to us.
This is true. Probably.
Sorry about
it. This week's episode is about the Titanic. We went back and forth about this one, whether we shouldn't do it, why we wanted to do it. Titanic is historic. I mean, you're talking about, there's obviously movies about it. There's been documentaries.
Kate, I still cry every time.
It's so funny. Actually, I just saw like a little reel on Facebook the other day, was what if Titanic never sank? And it obviously was part of the movie, not part of realistic stuff. So it's got, your favorite couple from the movie. I don't even know if we're supposed to mention their names. Can we mention their names?
I don't know. They're fucking famous. I
meant the character-wise. But anyway, so they come walking off the boat together, all, whatever, having meals together, in a room together, all kinds of weird stuff.
She cashed it and said Blue Diamond.
Yeah. So, but we're going to talk about a lot of different things. We're going to talk about the theory, excuse me, the theories that are out there. We'll talk about the wreckage itself. We'll go into the movie. We'll go into realistic stuff, and just kind of bring up a couple things that you may already know, you may not know. And again, we'll always just ask you at the end, what are your thoughts on everything? And we'll go from there. So with that being said, as we always do, Gillian's going to give us a start with all of her massive knowledge of research or laughter.
Okay. I was so disappointed in the lore behind all of this, because I was looking for something super juicykins, and I'm gonna tell you what, it wasn't. It just wasn't. But there were some really fun facts, some really sad stories. That some of them were portrayed in the movie, like that old couple that died. Where they were holding each other, that was true. That happened. She didn't get on the boat because her husband wouldn't get on the boat, because more women and children needed to get on the boat. And so they ended up sinking together. That is so precious, because she wouldn't leave him. Anyway, so the Titanic was built in 1911. It sank on its maiden voyage in April 1912, tax day, I think, April 15th.
April 14th. I'm pretty sure it was the 14th.
Maybe it hit it on the 14th and sank on the 15th.
Could be. Maybe I read that wrong, but I thought it was the 14th.
I don't know. Tax day seems pretty fitting, considering that money is a reason people think that wasn't what actually sank. So we'll get into that. So the Titanic was 882 feet and 9 inches long. Those 9 inches are important to some men, if you catch my meaning. It cost about $7.5 million to build in, I think in like 1910 is when, or 1909. Anyway, when they started building. It
It was
was
1909.
Was it '09? Okay.
Yep.
So the Titanic was a fraternal triplet. So there were three other ships, roughly the same size. They were a little bit older, but they were all kind of built the same, like they called them the sister ships. So there was the Britannic and the Olympia. Um, and okay, so here's the sad part. It's one of. It was equipped with 64 lifeboats. Like it was equipped to hold 64 lifeboats, which would have been able to, at capacity, handle all of the persons on board. However, because they were showboating, pardon the pun, they only put 20 lifeboats on board. There had been 6 warnings for icebergs before one actually hit. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they mentioned it in the movie, but I think it was also like facts that they didn't slow down because they were trying to beat their time, because they wanted to not only be like the biggest boat and the most awesome and this grandiose, gross, narcissistic crap, but they wanted to also like show that they could get there faster. So
Record time. They had all their engines going at once, so they could get there in time. That speed is pretty much what was the end of them.
fun fact, it has 4 smokestacks, and one of them was just for show.
Yeah,
Oh,
very true. A lot of modern day ships, most of their stacks are not
mentioning.
yeah, they're usually like there's something else. I can give you an example. Like on the Disney cruise, one of the smokestacks is actually a club for the kids. So they're not all what they seem. Backtracking a little bit to what you and I were both talking about the day that it sank. So here's why there are 2 different dates. It hit the iceberg on the 14th and it officially sank on the 15th.
Okay,
So
so
it was when, so it hit, I forgot the exact time. Forgive
because
me
it
for
went
not
down
remembering the
at
time.
like 2
2
o'clock.
in the morning. It was like 2 in the morning.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it hit before midnight. It was like 11 something when it hit, which is where
actually.
April 14th,
eh.
and then officially sank on the 15th.
Okay. So only 700% survived the sinking, and over 1,500 people died. So more than half of the passengers would have survived if the lifeboats that were on board had been full. But thank you, corporate greed.
Well, there was a lot to it. It was a little bit more than just a corporate greed. Um, a little bit also dealt with they did not want to cause panic, so they weren't really loading all the boats in the beginning because they figured if they started getting everybody on all the boats, that would cause more of a panic, which would cause hysteria, which would cause, you know, a lot of, what's the right word I'm looking for? Chaos, I guess, on the boat. So there would have been that. The other part too was they weren't sure exactly when um, help was going to come. So they weren't in that much of a panic until they realized that the boat was going down a lot faster, which is where then they really tried to get all the boats. And at that point, it was way too late. So that
so
was kind of where that went in.
Sure. So the ship had 2,223 people on board, including the crew. At capacity, it would have been 3,500. So thankfully, it was not full. Like it
Right.
was not full. That was great. And it launched from Belfast. And I only mention that because I didn't know that. I didn't realize that it had launched from like Northern Ireland. I thought it had launched from England. But now I'm starting to remember the beginning of the movie Titanic, and
Well, they
why.
started off in England, they stopped off in Ireland, and then from there they went on.
Um, but I didn't realize that, so that's why I wrote that down. Okay. So that a lot of people misquoted saying that the crew was talking about how it was an unsinkable ship, but it was not. That was not what was said. It was practically unsinkable.
Right.
And that just kind of got lost in translation over the years because it sounds better, I think.
I mean, it sounds cool. Hey, this is an unsinkable ship. Well, it's made out of
Yeah.
steel, of course. Just like they say in the movie, it's made out of iron, sir. I can assure you she's going to sink.
Yeah. Okay. So there were more than 700 third class passengers, not second class, not first class, third class. And these 700 people had 2 bathtubs that they had to share. 2 bathtubs for 700 people to share. That is gross and rude. Okay. The quartermaster, who was Robert Hitchens, he was at the helm and he tried to avoid hitting the iceberg. So he served 4 years for attempted murder in 1933, which I thought was really wild because 1,500 people died and he served 4 years. And I can't help but wonder if that's because like he tried so hard once it was realized what was going on, but like 4 years for 1,500 people, children, like, oh, I just can't. Okay. The owner of the Titanic, Bruce Ismay. Ismay
Ismay is not the owner.
It says the owner of the Titanic.
Was it Ismay? It was J.P. Morgan.
I think he was the owner of the company that built the Titanic.
He was the owner. So J.P. Morgan was the owner of White Star, which owned the Titanic, which owned the Olympia, and which owned the Britannica.
Okay.
So Ismay is the guy who ran White Star, if I'm not mistaken.
He was the chairman.
Yeah, he was the chairman, but he was not the owner. The owner was J.P. Morgan.
All right. Well, when you guys click on the link that I'm going to give about, it says owner, so you guys can at them or whatever. Anyway, he survived the shipwreck. Now we'll get into J.P. Morgan in a minute because he plays into one of the conspiracies. So the Titanic now lies 12,600 feet underwater, which is almost 2.5 miles. And they think that the iceberg may have reached up to 100 feet above water, and it would have been a total of 200 to 400 feet long, like from top to bottom, like under the water. So they're like, it was just gigantic underneath the water. So what we saw versus what actually hit what.
So I was going to add. So I misspoke. So I'm going to correct myself. Ismay did own it. J.P. Morgan financed the building of the ships, but Ismay owned White Star and owned the Titanic. So my apologies. I corrected myself. I wanted to make sure that we got that correct. But yeah, the reason why I brought up J.P. Morgan is in and I might be stealing thunder, but just because I already brought up his name, I want to make sure that I bring this up correctly. J.P. Morgan, as the conspiracy theories go, all right, there's no other way to say it other than the Titanic was losing money. Essentially, is what it was. He was losing money
because of what?
I'm not. You tell him.
Because of the Olympian. Go.
So the Olympic was an older ship than Titanic. It looked very similar to the Titanic. It was the older ship, and he was losing a lot of money on that. And when it also spent a lot of money building Titanic. So, as the conspiracy theory goes, he had taken out an insurance policy on the Olympic. They switched ships. So technically, again, according to the conspiracy theory, is that the ship that sank was the Olympic and not the Titanic. The Olympic was repainted, refitted, was done up here and there to make it look like the Titanic, but it wasn't built to code. There was a lot of things that were wrong with it. And as it went down, well, let me backtrack here. So JP Morgan, as you guys already know, huge, multi-millionaire, famous for finances and money, and of course JP Morgan and all that other stuff, like the finance companies.
Damn the man.
So he was supposed to be on the Titanic. He was booked to be on it the whole thing, and at the very last moment, he had canceled. Now, again, to deepen the conspiracy theory here, all of his financial what's
Rivals.
the rivals would be a good word, were all on the Titanic,
Yeah, those
and none
rivals.
of them lived.
Those rivals would have been Jacob Astor,
Yes,
Isidor Straus, and Benjamin Guggenheim. And they
Guggenheim.
of the
Every one of them, yes, every single one of them perished. And he collected a payday on the Titanic, as well as all of his adversaries, all gone.
so
So,
that theory, it was born from the fact that he was supposed to be on board. So that's he was definitely supposed to do. He was supposed to be there. And then he literally, like, I think it was right before it sailed, he was like, "Yeah, just kidding, I'm not going." Now, there has been just so we're going to just kind of debunk that one here for a minute. There's been no evidence to suggest that he had any knowledge that something like this were to have like was going to happen. They haven't found any like correspondence to show like there's nothing like that. Now, um, okay, so why they think that he was trying to get rid of his adversaries was because of the Federal Reserve. So, my pink pants. Um, so he the theory is that he thought that they were all against the Federal Reserve, and I don't understand the Federal Reserve. I don't understand it. Whatever. But moral of the story is that he didn't like the idea that they were against it because it would behoove him to have the support. But Astor and the Guggenheim dude, they didn't have any position on the reserve, and Strauss actually supported it. So that kind of defunct that little bit um, of that. Um, and so there was no reason. We'll get to the finance part of it for like the insurance fraud. So that'll come up in a minute when we get there. But anyway, moral of the story is there was no evidence to support that there was any foul play as it pertained to his rivals, because the reason they would have been like rivals like didn't actually exist.
right, which is, but again, that's where that's the biggest conspiracy theory. I remember as a kid hearing like it didn't really hit an iceberg. Now this is granted before they found her, but one of the conspiracy theories was it was sunk by a German U-boat, that they shot a torpedo and it sank it and blah blah
That was
blah.
a different ship.
Yes, it was a different ship, but again, that they were, it was rumored that that was part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll let you keep on going about Ismay, um, who at the time, or after I should say, after the Titanic goes down, he's like the most hated man in the world. So, and if you watch the movie and you know who Ismay is, you'll know exactly the reason why. And if not, we'll tell you at one point or another.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't really have much more on him. I mean, he's a hated dude. He survived.
Ismay basically, so Ismay is hated because one, he was a
On
pompous
down with the
ass.
ship.
He was just he was think about any movie that you've ever seen of like the rich people of that time that would look down on anyone that wasn't of their elk, or on their same level of any way. He was one of those.
Well,
Um,
and if you remember in the movie, and I know it's like part of the movie, but it talks about like a classism there where they're making fun of, I think her name is Miss Brown. It's
yes, Molly Brown.
and they're like, oh, she's new money and she's wealthier than some of these bitches on here, but because she's new money, she's not
Right.
pompous money. Like it was even though she had the same money and she was in that class, she was still lower class than
She wasn't
them.
brought up with it. She just kind of she they I forgot what it was that they got into,
I think,
oil or something.
yeah,
Yeah, so she wasn't on their level, even though she had the money.
yeah,
Um,
like it's just it's part of the classism.
right. Where with Ismay was, he was still barking out orders when it was, till the last minute. You know, the captain had to go down with the ship, and the crew had to stay on there. And again, if you watch the movie, he jumped into a boat with nothing but women in it, to save his ass, which, in the grand scheme of things, a lot of people would have done. But again, you're telling people you need to stay, you need to do this, that, whatever. He jumped onto the boat, where so many other, men, women, and children, died. So he was hated for forever, pretty much. I think until the day he died, he was a hated man, for what happened. So
Yeah.
Ismay was just one of those guys. And again, if you watch it, if you watch the Titanic movie, he is portrayed by a great actor. But he literally just made it, um, perfectly clear that he was a douche beyond, any kind.
Douche canoe.
Yeah, definitely a douche canoe.
He was such a douche canoe. And so they waited an hour. So this motherfucker was it was sinking. They knew gathering water. One of the fucking pieces, it failed. So like one of this fail safe thingies that was supposed to keep
The
it from
doors. There were doors that were going up. Yeah, it failed and water was leaking over, and that's what caused the problems.
Yeah, and so like it might have been preventable, or not preventable, but like it might have taken a lot longer, and they could have probably been rescued had that not taken place, but it did. And so they waited for an hour, like after they hit the iceberg, they waited to drop the first lifeboat. And the water, just for reference, was 20 degrees when it started to sink. 28 degrees. Now, fun fact, the human body can survive 45 minutes in that freezing water. Now, this is fun fact because the chief baker, he said, so he survived treading water for 2 hours. So when most people could have only survived 45 minutes, he survived for 2 hours, and he credits this survival to the copious amounts of whiskey that he consumed whilst he was waiting for this motherfucker to go down. So he's like,
I mean,
I'm going down, bitches.
listen, if it's gonna help, it's gonna help. I'll drink as much as I can if it's gonna keep me alive.
To that dude, Chief Baker.
Cheers.
Dude, amazing. This is just tea, by the way.
Just made in Long Island.
It could have been. You don't know.
You don't know. You don't know nothing.
Okay. So here's a really sad fact. The US, the SS Californian was nearby when the Titanic sank, and it was roughly 19 to 21 miles away. It didn't mention how come it didn't get there faster, or like what it was. I don't know if there was like an SOS that didn't get received. Do you know?
I do. And I'm so glad that you used the word SOS. Okay. So I took a communication class in college, and this was hammered into my head. It's one of the most useless facts that I have in my head. But it does bring up the exact point of what's going on here. So I'm actually going to read it because I want you guys to hear the exact thing, but it's called the Radioactive 1912. Okay. The Radioactive 1912, formerly known as an Act of to Regulate Radio Communication, was the first U.S. federal law to require radio station licenses and regulate radio transmissions. It was passed in response to the sinking of the Titanic earlier that year, where radio interference delayed rescue efforts. The act aimed to improve maritime safety and prevent future disasters. Here's what the act established. And there are 4 different things. And as we go through each one, it kind of reinforces why this radio act came into play, and kind of what happened with the delay. So the first part is licensing. All radio operators.
My dog, I yelled at her and was like, you better not want to go out before I start recording because I'm done. And then she wants to go out. So hold on, keep talking.
I'll keep going. All right. So licensing, all radio operators needed federal licenses to send messages out of state, preventing amateurs from improperly sending or receiving messages. Distress signals. A separate frequency was designated for distress calls, which had absolute priority and required 24-hour radio monitoring by trained users. The act clarified the distress code as SOS, which is save our souls or save our ship, depending on it meant both of them. So it's just how people interpreted it. The fourth part of it was ship radios. All seafaring vessels required to maintain 24-hour radio watch and contact nearby ships and coastal radio stations. And the last part of it, and again, this is not the entire thing, but these are the main parts about the Titanic. Well, are credited to the sinking of the Titanic. Amateur radio. Amateur radio operators needed licenses and were prohibited from broadcasting on commercial and military wavelengths. So essentially, what was happening was back then there was no regulation of any kind of radio waves. Okay, so anybody could opt on the radio if they had the proper equipment and could broadcast. And what happened at that point was there were signals that were strong enough that were interfering with the Titanic's um, distress signals to other ships, which is what caused the delay of the other ships getting those signals in time, which is what delayed them from showing up to save the Titanic. So when they gave the order to start the distress signals, they were doing it, but one, they delayed it. I mean, just like you said, they waited an hour before they started shutting things down. So it took them a while before they started, because they didn't realize exactly what had happened. And two, there were other signals going back and forth, which interfered with the Titanic signals getting to the other ships. So that is a big part as to, or let me rephrase that. That is one of the parts that led to the sinking of the ship and people getting 1,500 people getting killed, where it could have been a whole lot less.
Yeah. And if they could have just shared that stupid door, Leo would have made it and it would have been fine.
And we'll talk about that too. We'll talk more about that.
Don't. You're gonna say the thing that's just gonna piss me off because
they kill.
It's so sick. Whatever. Okay. So the musician. So in the movie, hello, James Cameron. I need you to sponsor this episode. So the musicians did in fact play the violin like how it was portrayed. They played for 2 hours as the ship went down. And the song that they believe was the last song that was played on the ship before it went down was Near My God to Thee. I just think that's so sad and so beautiful at the same time. They did. And that's just wild to me. It's like, it's one of those like really beautiful moments where like the musicians, I mean, because I'd like to think that it was how they were in the movie, like, come on, boys, let's just play, but then I'm like, these pompous motherfuckers are like waiting for this ship to go down. And they're like, where's my music? Come on, play my music. I
think it's kind of funny as I hear your dog barking in the background.
Can you really? Fucking bitch, man.
Think of, again, first class. They brought their dogs with them. They had their pets with them. There was no pets that survived. Those pets went down with the ship as well.
9 did.
9 did. Okay, sorry. 9 did. Out of God knows how many that were on there. I'm sure those dogs were going nuts, running all over the place. But again, think about that. 9 dogs survived. How many humans didn't?
It was like 6 or 9. I think I have that actually in my little facts. Hold on. It doesn't matter. Keep talking, because I know I read something about the dogs and I was like, oh, the poor puppies.
So Gillian brought up 2 things. She brought up James Cameron, who obviously directed the Titanic. And then she talked about obviously our famous couple trying to get on board the door. James Cameron he has gone down to the wreckage. I'm sure you've probably seen that. He's done quite a few different specials. He's actually been down to the Titanic's wreckage. in, their submersibles to get a better understanding of everything. Um, with that being said, he has created two specials, and forgive me, I cannot remember the names of either one of them right now. My brain
Titanic,
is good.
what did Titanic do?
No, he did a special about 20 years after the movie was made. Um, and he brought in all of these like experts, Navy divers, um, oceanographers,
Part
the
of it,
whole
it was
thing.
wild.
He brought everybody in, and they analyzed the film. They analyzed all the data. They analyzed, the ship on the ground, on the surface, or the bottom of the ocean, the debris field, everything, because he wanted to know, did we get it right? And they're all having conversations, they're all having debates, they're all having arguments. They go back and forth, and they realize they made little things here and there could have been done to make it better, or that they got this wrong, they got that right, whatever the case was. And then he made a part two to that. So I think it was like 10 years after. Um, and they revisit everything, and now they're talking about the technology that they had at that point when this was only a few years ago. And I'll try to see if I can find the names of both of those documentaries, and we'll post them. Uh, where they literally went in and realized, hey, they made mistakes here, here, and here. And I'll leave this to you to watch because I want you guys to see it. It was definitely well made, but that was kind of cool.
He could
Now,
have survived, huh?
so one of the things were, because obviously everybody says, "Fuck," he could have survived if she would just moved over. They would have. So they actually brought in, um, I don't know if I really want to call them actors. I don't think they were actors. They brought in two people, um, to portray, Kate Winslet and Mr. DiCaprio, um, and they had the door they were in water under the same circumstances, whatever, and they did it a bunch of times, and they finally got it to the point where they both could have been on the door at the same time, where they both would have survived. So that puts that kind of thing. Now, obviously, this really didn't have anything to do with the Titanic sinking. It was more of, in the movie, could we have gotten it right to where they both would have survived? Obviously, the ending would have been completely different, but that's there. So again, I will dig up. Forgive me for not having the names. I will dig up the names of both of those, and we will get them posted on the episode for everyone to see, to go from there. Now, there is another film. I'm not talking about documentaries because there's tons of documentaries about this. There is another film. Um, if you ever get a chance to see, it's an older movie. Um, Not the best acting in the world, but I remember as a kid, and then I actually found it on Tubi. If you don't know what Tubi is, it's a free streaming movie service you can download to your TV.
They do not sponsor us.
So the name of the movie is called Raise the Titanic, and it was made in 1980. So it was before the Titanic was actually found on the bottom of the ocean. So the premise of the movie is, and Gillian will love this, is that of course it's corporate greed. They there's a rare mineral, and I can't remember what it is. I don't think it's iron ore. It's something I forgot. That uh, the only place in the world where this rare mineral is in the belly of the Titanic. So their thought is, again, in 1980 they didn't know that the ship was broken in half. They just assumed, it was going along, and then it just sank and just went straight down like that. So um in the movie, the idea is that they use this. At the time, it was like this great new technology where they put balloons into the ship, inflate the balloons, and the ship will slowly rise. So the ending of the movie is kind of hysterical because you see a completely solid Titanic, rusted and all whatever, getting tugged into New York Harbor, which is crazy. But again, if you're really into this stuff and you really want to see a B rate, a B movie, um, Raise the Titanic from 1980 is a movie you would definitely want to see. So that's my 2 cents.
Show me in the calls. Oh, did it just change it for you?
What?
No, the view didn't change for you.
No.
Okay, well, it just changed for me, so I don't know how people are going to see these. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, so now it took 2 hours and 40 minutes for the Titanic to sink. So that's important because it wasn't very long, and so you figure they didn't start loading the little lifeboats until an hour. For like an hour. So they're like just chilling, no big deal. We're just gonna drink our fucking martinis dry with extra olives and all of that, and pet our dogs and ignore the people downstairs because they're third-class citizens. And for an hour they did this. It was no big deal. And so imagine you have an hour and 40 minutes from the time you drop the first lifeboat to try to get as many people on, but then you're also trying not to cause more hysteria. So it's just wild. Anyway, the name of the ship was actually the RMS Titanic, and the RMS, which I did not know, stands for Royal Mail Steamer, because it was actually transporting mail, which is a fun little fact that I didn't also know nor cared about. Can you imagine? I wonder what those letters said.
The letters? Oh.
Yes. So like there was letters on there. Like were these, I mean, forget-me-nots or like.
Well, you got to figure in 1912, they're still during World War I.
Yes. No. Before.
Before. What's
before? After? Hold on.
Maybe it's after. No, 1915 to 17, I think, is World War I, right?
Hold please, because this is super, super, super important because I have a thing about it. 1915. So it would have been right at, no. 15 was the Listeria, but Lusitania. How do you say that one?
Lusitania?
That's the one. Listeria. I don't know why that one. I cannot. Even staring at it, I can't say it. So I think it was like, I don't know. I don't know when wars happened. I'm so bad.
Hey Siri, when was World War I started?
I think this is right before.
July 28th, 1914. Thank you, Siri. So it was before.
That started.
Yeah. It was before.
It was before?
It was before.
Oh, you said 14 and I thought April 14th.
April 14th.
So. Oh my God, my brain is so dumb. I'm like legit when people are like, "Oh, are you dyslexic?" Like, how are you dyslexic? I'm literally dyslexic. So, fun fact, there you go. Okay. The lifeboats had room for 65 people per each, and the first boat only had 28 people on it. Really sad. 13 couples aboard the Titanic were on their honeymoon. Okay. The other last fun fact that I have about the Titanic is that it took 70 years for them to find it, the wreckage, and that took place in 1985.
Well, they found it in 84. I think it was, and it was, oh my God, why can't I think of his name? I can't remember the name of the man who found it. He was working with the U.S. Navy. They were doing stuff, and he kind of paid them to do some sort of research, and they to scavenge that area. And I think it was on the last day they found it. But again, they didn't realize. Yeah, they didn't realize again it was broken. But think about it. There was that expedition, or not expedition. The millionaires. There's another conspiracy theory you can talk about with the submersible that went down, that imploded, going down to see the Titanic. There's, that's a whole other conspiracy theory we're not going to get into. But it takes, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, about 4 hours or so to submerge from the surface to get down to the Titanic. And the portals are like this big to look out. So it's not like you've got a lot. You're crammed into a very, very tiny space. And if there's any problems, you have a 4-hour ascent to get back to the top. Or you could implode within seconds.
Why are you still talking? I can't breathe.
They did find the wreckage on the bottom next to the Titanic of that submersible.
Oh my God. Not.
But yeah, that thing imploded like within seconds. So, but again, that's a whole nother conspiracy theory to deal with.
I had a hard time doing my MRI. Like I was okay because if I looked back this way, I could see the exit.
Yeah.
And then like if I looked, up, I could see out. But like staring up, I was like, breathe, I can breathe. And if I need to exit, like, no, this whole submersible thing with this much, no.
I will tell you, when I was in my 20s, there was a shirt that I wanted to buy so bad because I thought it was funny and fucked up at the same time. It was, God forgive me. It's got a picture of the Titanic and it says Titanic swim team. And I was in my 20s.
Have this shirt. I want this shirt.
It was like, I thought it was the coolest and funniest thing. But I couldn't bring myself to buy it. And now as an adult, I think it's even more fucked up that I want it. But I can't find it anywhere.
I want it now. I will make one.
Oh, I'm sure you could. I mean, you don't even, it was funny because they had the Titanic swim team like written in like what looked like metal beams or whatever. It's really, really morbid, but
the quickness in which I'm going to the Christian version of hell is
it's
vicious.
So
okay, so let's talk about the conspiracies, yeah. So the really fucked up part is that the conspiracies kind of took a shit when the wreckage was found.
Correct. Because again, I mean, we thought, some people thought they really never did hit an iceberg. It was, the torpedo. So that obviously wasn't the case. The torpedo wouldn't have ripped the ship up like that. The JP Morgan thing. I mean, you can kind of go back and forth with it. It's a great theory. I mean, it really is. I mean, that's pure evil. Not to say that that's not something that can be done. That just takes a lot to get accomplished. Because again, I don't think that he paid anyone to hit an iceberg because there was no chance that they were to have an iceberg. So it's nice to think after the thought, but I don't think that was ever planned that way.
No, I mean it's a stretch. Plausible, sure, but less. So we talked about JP Morgan, so there was that one. So another one that is very common is that it never sank, that it was an insurance fraud, like basically at its finest. And so this suggests what we were talking about earlier about the RMS Olympic that was kind of switched places. So now the Olympic. Ooh, boy, this ship was a clunker. So it was damaged while it was en route from England to New York in September in 1911. And when it returned to Belfast for repairs, it was a lot. So so they had done the repairs. I think it might have been like a patch job, but they sailed it from New York and back. And then they made a few more repairs in March of 1912. And this is where the theory is kind of born, is that a few weeks after the March 1912, it's when the Titanic sailed for the first time. So they were like, so it is claimed by some that the Olympics damage and repairs, the cost was too high to be profitable anymore, because it just, I mean, salt water does a number on metal of any kind, and so like it just requires a lot of repairs. And it was a very large ship. It was the largest of its time until the Titanic was built. So it was said that it was switched with the Titanic to ditch the overall cost of the repairs. So that's just really fucked up. Like, that in theory, if this is true, then you're thinking that this person, whoever the owners are, everybody who's invested, they're coming together and they're like, it would be a great idea if we just fuck off this ship. We'll repaint the Olympic. We'll make it look like it's the Titanic, and hope to hell that at some point it's going to sink quickly. And who cares how many people die on board, and we're just going to just fuck with everyone. But I mean, really, if you kind of think about it, they purposefully, I'm not saying this is true, and I'll get to why, but like, if they did this, they purposefully did not put enough lifeboats. So that would have maximized the amount of people who would have died, which means that if there was any type of claims for financial restitution for the family, it would have minimized that. So in theory, they would have collected on the insurance, and then they would have minimized the payouts. So it could have been very lucrative for them to have done this. Where the hole comes in is that the insurance payout wasn't enough to cover the repairs to get the Olympic to be back to running order. So I hate that the hole is that the insurance money wasn't enough to cover the repairs, like to make it worthwhile to do, not the whole being that people would have maliciously intended to kill 1,500 people.
Yeah. Excuse me. I mean, and again, it had to have been planned perfectly, because again, you didn't know what the icebergs were going to be like. You didn't know whether those guys were going to see the iceberg. So, in the crow's nest, to let the tower know, hey, we've got to turn, or whatever the case was.
But they were running at full steam. So like, even seeing them, knowing, I mean, they saw 6 before they hit this one. They weren't like, shit, we've just seen 6 icebergs. We might want to slow it the fuck down so that we can avoid if we see one in advance. I mean, so it's plausible. It's very plausible that this could have happened.
It is, but you also, so let's look at this. This was also late at night. There's no radar. There's no any of that stuff back then. The captain, I mean, according to the movie, the captain was asleep. Ismay was asleep. Anybody who had any kind of say in whether they could slow down or not was asleep. So they didn't really have the authority to make a decision to shut down one of the engines, to slow her down.
Like, if you've seen 6 icebergs and you're running at full steam, you wake someone up.
Agreed, but they didn't. I mean, that's the thing is, it's a matter of, I mean, again, Ismay wanted to break records and wanted the news to show that they've got this amazing new ship.
Listen, I get it. Every time my GPS tells me it's going to take me 15 minutes, I'm going to get there at 4:37. I will be goddamned if I'm not going to get there in 13 minutes.
So yeah,
I race my GPS all the time. Can you imagine what I would do with a giant ship?
Well, that beautiful giant ship is sitting at the bottom of the Atlantic, rusting away.
Fault. I was racing the GPS.
It was. I mean, that thing is rusting away. Give it another 100 years, I don't know what's going to be left of that ship. Because it's rusting away now. I like they use the term, if you ever watch any of the documentaries where they send in the rover, little, like, mechanical camera sub thing, whatever you want to call it. It starts going down like the halls, it goes into the rooms, it goes to all the stuff, and they call them, instead of icicles, they're rusticles. So the rust is coming down and they're like hanging down. They call them rusticles. But the problem with that is if the little rover thing hits it, rust comes down. Like it just like it showers like that area for 30 seconds to a minute because all the rust is nothing. I mean, I don't even know what kind of fish are. I mean, I know that there are fish down at that depth, but there's not much that's swimming into the ship.
I don't know. I saw the Little Mermaid, and they're just fucking around, and the shark comes and
I
almost gets
mean,
flounder, and she gets away, and then there's a
and
and the
there's a
shark.
whole crazy thing that goes on in there.
There's no
But
rust. There's no rust.
right, but the Titanic is a little different because that's real.
It's supposed to be the Titanic.
It's supposed to be real. So, but yeah, it's kind of cool. Like again, you get to see.
It's a wood ship. Just kidding.
You get to see just that whole aspect of it where it in reality of it it's falling apart. I mean the debris field is kind of crazy because it's just like the whole middle of the ship is ripped apart and whatever was in the middle just scatters. I believe it's over like a 1 mile radius of where it is. And then you find things that I mean like if you've never seen pictures of the scattered stuff, I mean there's like plates and cups and things that are just pristine that are just still sitting down there. They've brought up a ton of stuff. There is the Titanic Museum where a good portion of the stuff is there. I know that they have a museum in England where they've got stuff. I believe that there's a touring one. I don't know if they still do that anymore. But yeah, there's there's things that they have brought up from the ship that are going to be treasured forever. But it just amazes me that you can see all of that stuff. And that night I can't even I mean there's nobody that's still alive from the Titanic. I mean the thing sank over 100 years ago. So 111 years ago that thing sank.
We're so old.
So there's no one. I doubt highly there's anybody still alive. I mean, the oldest person would have been a baby, which can't even imagine. Them being 111 years old at this point. Not that they would remember that night anyway. So
though, like psychologically speaking, that their memory would not remember that night, but they're like
subconscious.
Still have the trauma memory of it.
I mean,
the mind is just mind blowing.
That it is. But yeah, so it's crazy. But the water does preserve a lot of things. So like I said, there's plenty of stuff that is still preserved. It's crazy. I want to say there's in Sweden or Finland. I can't remember which one of those countries. There is actually one of the largest ships, wooden ships ever to be found. It was underwater for years, like from the 1500s, if I'm not mistaken. That they have. No, it was. We're talking about this is past the Viking stuff, but it's actually like a ship. There are Viking ships that they've found and they've got, but the water sometimes preserves things in ways that you don't expect. So, but the Titanic is slowly fading away. Should be a memory at one point, and that's about it because there won't be any proof of it. Almost like Atlantis. Who knows? Maybe this was our Atlantis. There's no proof of it, but we'll talk about Atlantis at a different time.
Definitely a different time. So there is a theory, and well, it's a dumb theory now that I think about it, but it was one that was like posited. But I like the fact behind it. So another theory was that it was switched with the Lusitania. Is that how you say it?
Lusitania, yeah. That's what I heard at one point because they look very, very similar as well.
Yep. So it was also a bougie motherfucking liner built in 1906. It was 787 feet. Bougie, and they were both meant to cart rich ass motherfuckers from one country to another between Europe and the US. They were both British made, and when they were made, they were the longest that had been built. So there was that theory that it had been like switched out, but the Germans were responsible for the
Lusitania.
Lusitania. for the Lithuanian. Somehow that's simple. Anyway, the Germans were responsible. So in May 7th, 1915, 3 years after the Titanic, the Germans issued a warning to Americans saying it was World War I. And the Germans had warned the American newspapers that any vessels that sailed the ocean that had a British flag would be tanked. And everyone was like, fuck all the way off, whatever, you're not going to do shit. And literally nobody believed them. And the captain even told a reporter right before sailing, he was like, this is the best joke I've ever heard in as many days. And he's like, all of this talk of torpedoing, it was he just thought it was a huge joke. So they set sail, and it cost over 1,000 lives, 128, which were Americans, because the Germans did in fact torpedo the ship because it flew a British flag.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought the facts of that was really interesting, but it was a real, a big stretch to say that one was switched.
Yeah, I don't think I mean, that was a rumor that it was, but I don't think that was the case. I could buy the Olympic, but I don't think it was a Lusitania.
Yeah, no. My favorite dumb theory is, okay, do you remember when, before we had cell phones, we used to have our calculators, and we would write little messages, like we would do 07734, and if you did it upside down, it said hello.
Hello, yeah.
So this theory is that the ship's number read no Pope, so NO space POPE, backwards. So if you were looking in a mirror, the number said no Pope. So the ship's number allegedly was 3909 space 04. So no Pope backward. Okay. So this is a stretch for me, because no Pope,
You don't believe in the Pope?
but no Pope. Also, okay. We're going to get to that. But no Pope, no Pope, there is no Pope. There's no Pope on board. Is a person's last name Pope? It's just a stretch. It's just a stretch.
They try to predict something?
That's what the thought was, that it was predicting doom. So it says that back then there were Catholic employees that they were distressed because they read it as no Pope when it was in a mirror, and this foretold bad luck. So that was a really, really big deal. Now the fact they were Catholic is also a very big deal, because I'll get to it. Now, this rumor didn't actually start until 1950s, and it was in a book. It was also listed in a book from the 1986. Historians pointed out that there was no such number on the ship. So after researching all of the different numbers, this number, this 3909-04, did not exist anywhere on the ship. So the whole number, Hull, Hull, was 401. And the Board of Trade number was 131,428, so 131,428. Now, where this gets even funnier to me is that there were no Catholic employees that were working for the White Star. Yeah, they had no Catholic employees working for them, because at that point, they were only employing Protestants. So they had records. There was no Catholic employees. So Catholic employees would have been the only ones who would have been upset with the no Pope, because Protestants don't give a shit about a Pope. So it defunct very quickly. But so that one was my personal favorite weird one. But those were the most common. The rest of them were really dumb and just absolutely ridiculous and not even worth mentioning. So I didn't go there. But my real question, the thing that is just, Rose, you've got some explaining to do, is where the fuck is the blue diamond? If she had taken off that diamond and just thrown it when she was alive, maybe it wouldn't have taken up so much weight on the goddamn door, and Leo could have been on it. But no, greedy bitch had to keep the diamond on her.
And we've gone off the deep end.
I am a girl, after all. Sometimes I know it's hard to tell, but I promise you, I am a girl.
You know what? I've got no answers for where that thing is. And I'm
Are we
okay
talking
with that.
about the diamond?
What was that?
Are we talking about the diamond?
Yeah.
Cool.
Ooh, all right. So,
Stone sober, man.
I think
Shit.
we're at the end of our Titanic part.
And I'm sorry it wasn't juicier. Like I was
Yeah,
for
we
juice.
we brought this up because this is one of the topics that we both really wanted to cover. Titanic is historic. It's it does have the conspiracy theories. And we wanted to touch on those. We knew this wasn't going to be too in depth, but again, it's definitely a topic that has been around forever. We wanted to talk about it. We wanted to bring it up. If there's anything that we missed, anything that you think that we got wrong, think that we could have added, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know. We'll put up all the information that we've got. Also, if you have any ideas, again, as we always ask, if you have any ideas that you want us to talk about, let us know. We'd be more than happy to do an episode on what you want to hear. We are going to delve into the Illuminati coming in our next episode. So we'll try to dig into the lore of the Illuminati.
If
The
anybody has anything, so like all four people who have listened to some of these episodes, 9 to some, if you guys are like, oh my God, I heard this thing about the text me, email me. Don't text me because that's fucking but email
especially
me.
if you don't give out your number, that's kind of weird.
I would never I don't I don't like that people from like work have my number. I'm weird about my number. Anyway, yeah, if you guys like are listening right now and you're like, ooh, I heard this thing or Beyonce or whatever, like I am all for going down the rabbit hole, so saith our name. So like please let us know. I want to know what these are because I want to dive into it. Like I want this one to be juicy and I really would love it to be like a two-parter.
Yeah, we can talk about symbols. We can talk about the
Dan,
artists.
when I read them, all of them.
There are, I mean, obviously, if you know anything about the Illuminati, you know anything about um, all the rumors that are going on. So my son keeps on saying he wants us to talk about Diddy. Diddy, we're going to keep kind of as this whole separate thing. We're
And
going to
that's
let that
a while. We're gonna let that ferment for a little bit.
we're going to let that kind of ferment. We're going to let it unfold, let that go. But I mean, we would be remiss to say that we wouldn't bring up his name in the next, in this next episode because that's kind of part of it. But this is, there's a lot to this. There's a lot because this has been going on for a long time. There's been rumors forever about the Illuminati in general, about the Illuminati in Hollywood. Um, who sold their soul for what's going on. Again, going into the symbolism.
I'm gonna need a contact name for the selling of the soul. I feel like I need an in-depth interview with the person who is buying souls. I need to know terms and conditions. I need to know if I want to sign up.
Yeah, his name is Louis Fur.
It's not. It's not. I know him.
So, again, there's so much in there. We'll talk about the black eye. We'll talk about what this means. We'll talk about.
Down is a pussy. Has anybody seen Ready to Rumble? Anybody?
So yes, we'll talk about just all kinds of stuff that they sneak in into movies. How to get into a movie, Mr. Weinstein, um, and all the other fun things that go along with it. So, again, any information you have that you want us to share, we'll gladly give you credit for any information that you give us.
Or we will let you remain anonymous should you choose to remain anonymous.
Absolutely. So, with that being said, again, we are so grateful that you guys take the time.
We're talking to about the Weinstein bit of it. Maybe we can talk about how just because somebody says things like cock munch doesn't mean that they're like welcoming sexual advances or comments like, I'll hit that.
Sure, we could do that.
We could definitely do that. Just as a subtle.
Subtle twist. So again, we definitely want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to us, two fools just trying to have some fun. Again, just to reiterate, this is all for entertainment purposes.
If you're not entertained, then it's not for entertainment purposes.
If you're not entertained, then I don't know what else to tell you. Listening to two schmucks talking.
Are you not entertained?
With all that, that is Gillian.
I'm Gillian.
I'm Allon. It has always been a pleasure. It's been our pleasure. Hope to see you guys next week. We're out. Deuces.
Deuces. I have to find the button. Okay, now deuces.